Hey everyone, we are back with round two of the Gathering Movement with Allison Canales talking about the art of embodied leadership. So, welcome back, Allison.
I'm happy to be here again.
Isn't this such a good example of going with ease and flow and just like allowing?
Trusting that this is the interview that needs to happen, not the other one.
Exactly. I would love for you to kind of reintroduce the topic again. So, the question was, what does embodied leadership mean?
Yeah, okay, this is good. I'm excited to re-answer this question. So I think this is a question I get a lot and it's an interesting one to explain because I find embodiment work is done so much without words and in the language of frequency and vibration. So to explain embodied leadership is like a funny, almost, yeah, a paradox of how do we fit this into human words for people to understand when it's really meant to be felt. And that's one of the key points is that embodied leadership is a way of leading through the intimacy of having a deep relationship with our bodies, our yes, our no's, our internal map of how our body works, where we hold tension, where we hold trauma, and understanding that as it applies to leadership. Especially in this day and age, so many of us, I myself have gone through processes or had been in a leadership position where I led so much through my head of trying to think of, okay, what's that next action outside of myself that's going to be the key to my success, or like what's that next tip or the next mentor or the next blog or whatever it may be. Whereas embodied leadership really invites us to come within and look at where us as individuals we're blocking ourselves from success, right? So much of it has to do with the body, and in a greater sense that connects with like the body of the world, Mother Earth, the elements, and it kind of is this deeper process of looking at where we can move through with more intimacy, with more trust and union within ourselves. And I kind of mentioned this in the other one, but paradox and the polarity of light and darkness. Embodiment really allows space for wholeness, and it allows space for you not to be like 110% all the time and show up and be like, woo, I'm so happy. I'm so like feeling good all the time. Like embodiment, like allows room for like, I'm in grief and I still can make money while I'm in grief. And that's the power of it because it allows us to be whole. So I think that's probably the best explanation I can give.
I love that. And as you were talking, I'm just like thinking back to why it is that we are so like, what's the next step? I need to be methodical and strategic. And I just think back to like school, and that's
Mhm.
all that we knew. It's like, okay, we were told to do an assignment, to get the grade, to get the A, to go to college, to do this, to do that. There was always this like methodical planning.
Mm.
And this work is so important now is because we're realizing that people are burnt out. People are so stressed. People are not in their pleasure, they're not in their joy. And we need leaders who are really embodying all parts of them. So the darkness, the grief, the overwhelm, the anger,
Mhm.
and the joy and the bliss and the connection, like all of it needs to be here.
Yeah, all of it, and there's space for it all, right? Instead of making it like wrong or bad or this is good and this is better, it allows space for us to be like, yeah, this is what I'm experiencing right now in my body. And it also, I think the reason why I switched into embodied leadership is because when I would work with women, it wasn't that they needed another strategy, like, they knew what to do, and I would often, like, have conversations and, like, the first 5 minutes of them hopping on the call, like, "Okay, like, what's real for you? What's present for you?" And they're like, "I don't know, I wanna make this much more money, but what strategy is it?" And I'm like in the first 5 minutes, I'd be like, "You know what to do, though," and they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, I do," and there was something deeper going on, right? It was, like, them being swallowed and drowning in their own, like, doubt or imposter syndrome or overwhelm or burnt out or fear that they couldn't take on the responsibility, like or anxiety or like something else was going on rather than them like they weren't they weren't trusting their own inner knowing of their body. Like that's what was really going on underneath the surface out of every single call I did, whether that was like someone trying to get I remember I had two clients, like one, she was at like 8K months and we got her to 100K. And then there was one that she was just trying to get her first, her first 1K in her month, in a month. And it was like the steps to get there, obviously they were different because their bodies were different, but the language of dropping them into, okay, well, where are you resisting success in your body, or where are you holding on to suffering in your body, was the exact same process, because it just meant they knew what to do. They knew what the steps were. It was just about guiding them back to trusting themselves in a deep way. And like you said, it's like we've grown up in a culture in school or just even mirrored by our parents of like, being disconnected from our bodies, being disconnected from our truth, or especially as women, as I primarily work with women and womb carriers and people that identify as women, we've been really taught to be out of our bodies. And a big piece of that is like, oh, it doesn't feel safe to trust my body. So it's pretty revolutionary to shift into this way of embodied leadership. And I know for myself, it was like the scariest thing that I could have done, because I didn't know what it felt like to be like safe and trusting in my body, or like really be in my body. And I think a lot of people can identify with that wound too, of like a lot of us run in every different direction to not be here and now, because how could it be that simple to be that successful, or to be that happy, or to feel wholeness within ourselves, just like here, coming back to here. It's actually pretty simple, but we make it so complicated with all of our different hangups and traumas and blocks. But it's actually one of the most simplest things and most natural things. Like, we're all born embodied, and it's looking at the barriers of how among our timeline of our lives that we've begun to be more and more disembodied.
How did you personally start to learn about connection to the womb and connection to the body?
Yeah. So I had a really big experience in my life. I was 15. I had a really big spiritual awakening. I was super depressed. It was like the height of an eating disorder. And I remember just feeling really at a loss. Like, I was kind of like untethered to the world, like I didn't belong on this earth. And that at the time I wasn't aware, but it really stemmed from my childhood trauma of being sexually abused. And what happened when I was 15, I had this big spiritual awakening, which led me to move away from Canada and go live in the jungle in Mexico, and do a bunch of ayahuasca as a teenager, which is so great, and which is so weird thinking back to like that was my teenager. But it was the best thing that could have ever happened, because how I like to think of it as like, that time was the entryway to return to the land of the living. And so much of that was centered around coming back to my womb. Because of my eating disorder, I wasn't menstruating. And that was one of the first things the shamans were like, we need to get you menstruating again. Like, and there was a whole ceremony around, a couple of different midwives and shamans, and like people just like focusing on my womb for the night, which I don't know if anyone's familiar with ayahuasca ceremonies, but they last about 8 hours. So it was like some big womb work. And I was like, whatever, like, I was still 15, so I didn't really understand all the energetic, like hippie stuff. And the next day, after like 2.5 years of not menstruating, I got my period, or my moon time. And it was so powerful. And from there, it was like this entry point into coming back to my life force. For anyone that's like not familiar with womb work, that's like a whole other conversation, but the womb is like this cauldron for women as our life force energy. And it almost was like plugging that back into me, like almost like, not that it wasn't there, but it was dormant. It was hanging on by little traces of thread of being lit up, but there wasn't a lot of flow going on. And it really brought me back into my body, because I started to see the power that I held within my body to heal. And yeah, I really think that plant medicines, and probably just being in the jungle so close to nature, it like woke up my senses in a way that maybe being in more of the Western world, it was a little bit more challenging, because I was off in the jungle with really raw things going on all the time. So my body was learning to come back online after years of being asleep. That's how it felt.
Mm. Wow. You and I had actually a similar experience around the same time, not with ayahuasca, but just this awakening around the same time and coming back to our bodies and realizing how freaking powerful they are. So this is so beautifully synchronistic. I'm curious who have been some of your greatest teachers on your journey?
Mm, that's such a good question. It's interesting because I don't really connect with any of my teachers anymore. Honestly, I think some of my greatest teachers were some of the people that brought me the most pain. Definitely the people that had assaulted me. Although there was a lot of murkiness to work through in my relationship to them, and I'm not in relationship to them in any shape, way, or form anymore, I would say that they were my greatest teachers because, and I chose to look at it like that just as a preface, because I know for some people aren't there yet or are in a place where forgiveness feels, applicable to their situation. But for me, that was definitely something that came through really strongly, and seeing the people that had hurt me in that way. As really big learning lessons. So I came to ayahuasca to come back to my body, with clearing history of the sexual abuse with my father. And then along that journey, being in that community, I realized that there was a lot of things that were kind of like out of integrity in that community, which ended up resulting in one of the shamans actually sexually assaulting me. So it was this big, I think that was kind of like a pivotal point of seeing how important it is to be embodied in what you teach. Because there's a lot of people that can say all the things, or even applying to Instagram or social media, you know what I mean? There's a lot of people that can say all the right things and have the nice, pretty graphics, but energy doesn't lie, right? So I think that was probably I was in so many situations like that. After that shaman, I was in a Native American community where the chief, there was some weirdness that happened with him and a young girl. And I started to see that there is these huge patterns of disembodied leadership, of people wanting to, there was medicine, but it was, for lack of a better word, like tainted because people weren't being in integrity with their truth. And I think that that's kind of a lot among my life. I saw so many people in positions of power that were misusing their power. And they were my greatest teachers because I think because of that, I had experienced so much misregulation. It made me really fired up and like almost feel like this protective sense of like, it is so important for leaders and coaches in the space to be embodied in what they teach and to be integrity, and to learn how to work with the paradox of their darkness and their light and see how they can, move forward in their highest alignment. So I feel like, yeah, they were my biggest teachers. I mean, there was a lot of anger to move through with them and like still a moving practice. But I think they really showed me the importance of like, you have to be anchored into what you do. And that is like on a day-to-day basis of anchoring into the vision of who you are and making that commitment to heal. It doesn't just stop when you're in a leadership position. It's, it's a lifelong journey, even when you are holding space for like, 20 people in an ayahuasca ceremony or running a Sundance community, or you have 70 people that have signed up for your program. Like that is a deep devotion to serve. And it makes it invites you into a deeper relationship of self-mastery with yourself, which is where my work has shifted into now, of like helping leaders become masters of what they do. So yeah, I think that's probably the best.
I love it. And just to like return to the way that we started, which was about like polarity, and it's sometimes these experiences teach us so much because they teach us what doesn't feel in integrity, and then we learn how we want to lead. And in your case, that's exactly what you're doing. It's like you saw people who were in leadership and powerful roles who were taking advantage, and you decided, okay, if I'm going to be a leader, I have chills because like you're here to teach leaders how to just be who they are in the fullest, most honest integrity. So it just feels so good. And the visionary in me is like, okay, so what would the world look like if we had more embodied leaders? Like, what would it look like?
I know. I love pondering this question too. And I think that a good question to ask is like, well, what are we experiencing right now with that disembodiment, right? Like, so I think for me, and a lot of us, when I first started my journey, I was super disembodied. I was just like, kind of like, okay, yeah, I want to hit the 6 figures and get the 10K months and all that stuff. And it was great. I hit some of those goals. But I realized it was like, even when you get to that destination, it was the process of getting there. Did it feel good? Did it make you feel alive? Oh, wow. Now my nervous system is a little fucked up because like I called in too many people and I don't know how to serve them. Or like, is it imposter syndrome? Or actually, am I not being integrity because I don't know how to hold space for this level of energetic clearing or healing that someone wants? Like, is it like all of those questions are really important, and you see it a lot in the coaching world or in spaces of leadership. I think the biggest one maybe to zone in on just for the sake of the conversation is so much of it has to do with the nervous system, right? Which I feel like is such a big part of success. And what I saw is like, oh, it's not that I'm like doubting my ability to hold space for like, maybe like 30 or 40 people. It's like, I actually don't have the energetic endurance to hold space for 30 to 40 people. Like, I actually am totally cool honoring myself of like, maybe I just want to call in 15 people. And it's not that I'm holding myself back or playing small. It's that I'm listening to my body and having a relationship with my body of knowing where that is. But also on the flip side of that, it's a very intricate process because it could be something like imposter syndrome or doubt, but it's so different for everyone because we as individuals need to know our body and our body's responses of like, oh, okay, where is that resistance coming from? And we can only do that through being present in our bodies rather than trying to like map it out in our heads. And this is such a good point too. I think a big part of my work has helped a lot of leaders like trust their instincts and trust themselves for the answers, because I think it's really often where we're looking for the next guru or the next person to save us, or like, well, who's that next thing that's going to guide me into that next level of leadership. And it's so important to hold space. Like, it is so important to have people hold space for us. But what's really important when we're having space held for us is also having that dialogue of checking back with us. Is just because they have seen something or they're channeling a message or whatever it may be, like, okay, but does that register with me? Like, how is my body feeling in that process? So I feel like in embodied leadership in all forms, like, it really allows space for our yeses and our nos, which seems so simple, but it's like, how would it feel to really know your no's and your yeses, and have that changes on a moment-to-moment basis sometimes. So I feel like that, like, thinking in terms of that is like a cool idea. Like, oh, that's kind of like what would embodied leadership would look like seeing how that would change, like even in 9-to-5s, if people were managing like that, and just like in the coaching world, like it's exciting. Like, I'm like, woo, regulated nervous systems, everyone wins.
This is so cool, and we could probably talk about this for hours, because I always think about the lottery winners who win all of this money, and then it's a major nervous system overload, and they're like, they can't literally hold the success, they can't hold that much, so a lot of them tend to spend it on something or lose it or whatever the case may be. And I think we need to remember that the journey is part of the process, and it's not always about the destination, which is what we all want because that's what we've been all told. But what if we could literally just tap into our bodies? And I love the idea that you're saying, like, yes and no, and really just feeling into that. It just feels so good.
I love that you mentioned that thing about the lottery winners, because that's such a good example. Or like, I've even seen it with coaches, like people like bring in these high months and then they're like, oh, I don't know what to do, and then they crash and burn, and then what's really sad is like, well, maybe I'm not meant to be a leader. Or or you see it on the flip side when people are just trying to call in their first couple of clients and they're like, okay, well, they sign up for these programs that are like, okay, we're going to get to like 5-figure months in 3 months. And then they don't do it. And then they're like, oh, well, maybe I'm not suited for this. But it's like, well, or maybe it was because they're, not to say you weren't ready, because I think that's sometimes a conversation, but it's like, well, maybe you just, your journey is different, because success is different. Success is a body language. And some, like, I know for me, my journey with success was maybe a slower start. It wasn't this fast, rapid thing, because I held a lot of trauma that I needed to clear, and that wasn't done overnight. But the commitment to slow, sustainable success, I realized, it's actually, it can be sexy as well. It doesn't have to be so flashy, which kind of is interesting, because it kind of goes back to that conversation that we're having about like sexual abuse and the womb. It's like, it's consensual with our bodies, and like thinking in terms of that, of like, when we're moving in the realm of embodiment, we're moving in the realm of consent. And those two words, like sensual, is part of the word consensual. So it's having that sensual relationship with our bodies. Sensuality kind of brings us back to embodiment of like, how do our senses feel? What is the temperature in our body when we're feeling resistance? Like, how can we drop into those spaces? And it kind of creates this like map, like our bodies are a treasure map, and we get to like explore and play with them. And when we do that, the process of getting to the destination, let's say that, becomes a lot more fun. Like, it becomes a lot more lighter, because we're giving ourselves more room to be like, I'm in grief, I'm angry today, but I still can show up and serve. I'm holding space for like my multidimensionality, like, and it's permission, which I think a lot of us are craving deep down inside as leaders, is permission to be and permission to lead the unique way that only we know how to lead. We don't need like replicas of each other. We just need to drop into the deepest, most expressive part of us, which feels scary, because it's like, oh, I'm here. I'm standing out as me, and owning that as part of our medicine. But it is what I think embodiment is, such a gateway into what I have started to kind of like think of as like liberated leadership, beyond the rules of how we're supposed to think. And I know, I love it too. I was like, I need to create a course around liberated leadership.
Yeah,
juicy word.
I love that. I just love everything that you're saying, and I'm curious, like, what's next for you on the horizon? Like, what are you in a time of introspection? Are you in a time of creation? Like, where are you at on the journey?
Yeah, so all of this has really been settling in, because I took an 8-month break from the coaching world. So this is perfect. I changed my name, obviously, to Allisons. So this is one of the first interviews I'm doing back in and engaging in the realm of coaching and all the things. So yeah, I'm right now, funny that you say, as I talk about liberated leadership, I think it maybe was a sign. I had a program called Radiant Leadership Academy, and I've had so many nudges to shift it into liberated leadership or something, because I'm realizing like that's my work in the world, like all of what we're talking about, the going beyond the matrix, all of this kind of stuff, bending the rules, coming back to ourselves, liberating ourselves literally from what we thought who we needed to be in order to be successful. So that's kind of in the works right now, of coming out in the spring, which I'm really excited about. I feel like there's this energy behind it that's so much bigger than me, and I needed 8, almost 9 months off to get my energetic body ready to carry the energy behind it, which feels really good. And then obviously the book, which is exciting too, which comes out in May.
So cool. And I've told you this personally, but I really do honor your sabbatical, and just like your time to just be with yourself. How cool. How cool. So like, thank you for embodying that and just doing what you needed to do. Like, that's to leadership to me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it felt really good. I was like, I need to do this every couple of years, just to be like, okay, social media is for me and cute selfies, no complicated captions. And I'm bringing that in. I was like, okay, I'm rewriting the rules of how I can post. I'm posting dog pics and selfies and food without having it to be this introspective, inspiring thing.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much, though. I feel so seen.
Oh, you're welcome. How can people connect with you if they'd like to?
Definitely on Instagram. That's my favorite way to connect with people. You can drop me a DM, which is just I am Allison Canales. I also have, if you go into Instagram, all the links are probably in the link tree, but I also have a Facebook group, which is starting to be active again, which is the Heaven on Earth Facebook group, because that's what this work is about, right? Is creating heaven on earth for ourselves. Again, not a destination, like we can be in the most tapped in joy and bliss in this moment. And so much of that is done through the paradox of embodiment.
Love it. Thank you so, so much. Thank you for sharing everything, your story, your words, just your energy. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you so much for holding space for this.
Thank you, everyone, and just have a beautiful weekend. I'm so grateful to have everyone here on this wild, meandering life journey. See you all later.